first of all, I'd like to thank you for the organizer of this meeting. It's a pleasure to be here. And my talk will be very brief. I don't have many slides. It won't take more than half an hour. I know everybody's hungry. So that's the good thing about the last one before lunch. Everybody will wait because they know after I finish they'll have food. So actually my presentation complements Abdel's presentation. I'm going to talk about also climate change. Basically I'm going to talk floods in São Paulo. We are going to move from Morocco to the other side of the Atlantic, going to São Paulo, the city of São Paulo. And actually, the reasons for floods in São Paulo are not because of sea level rise, but basically there are three main components. Strong urbanization, inadequate waste disposal, and of course, in our case, heavy rain, and that's what I'm going to talk about. I hope that at the end I'll raise a few key messages that are drawn from this exercise, but hopefully will be helpful for our further discussion on the development of Moroccan cities. So just for you to have an idea, São Paulo, I'm talking about this would be basically Brazilian's Casablanca if you look at the relative figures. Talking about the metropolitan area, which is roughly 6% of the whole metropolitan area. It's about roughly 10% of the Brazilian population, almost 20% of Brazilian GDP. And the core of this agglomeration, the city of São Paulo, is responsible for 6% of the population and 12% of Brazilian GDP. When you compare to Morocco, we are talking about 2/3 of the country's population in São Paulo and about twice as much the Moroccan GDP. So it's a very important metropolitan area, one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. But that's I'll have three maps give you some perspective. This is basically where people live. This density map, and what I want to call your attention for is when you look at the river basin. You see the rivers are shown here, but basically there are most of the disposals that come from the east part to the west part ended up in São Paulo city, and that's our study case. And this is where people work. It's much more concentrated in a central area of the metropolitan area. And when you look at income, per capita income, it's also relatively very concentrated in the city. Well, as for climate change and floods in São Paulo, basically, this study is related to a broader climate change agenda for Brazil, and we were asked to look at the impact of extreme events, basically because climate forecasts have been showing that I think that the most robust result they have is that there will be an increase in the frequency and intensity of short-lasting extreme events. In the case of São Paulo, we expect that at the end of the century, the number of days with intense rain is expected to increase in São Paulo. And when it rains heavily in São Paulo, we get situations that are not very pleasant. We were asked to quantify the economic losses. So our perspective is very focused on a specific type of vulnerability, the economic vulnerability associated with output losses, and basically we are asked them to improve the quality of not only policy design but also policy decision, giving appropriate or somehow appropriate answers for different areas to help policymakers in looking at and tackling these issues. How we did that? We have very detailed data about the flood events in São Paulo with very specific location. We were able to put that in maps, and we also that's just for you, that's for 2008. 2008, the main floods occurrences within the city limits of São Paulo. And we also have a very nice database with microdata at the firm level, and we have various details about each firm in the city, actually in the metropolitan area. What we do with this, with all this data, basically we are building scenarios, looking at areas of influence, different scenarios for the influence of the flood points. We are calibrating that at this moment, doing some field research, interviewing the affected firms in the proximity of these points, and we know where the points of floods are. The green points are the firms. We use this information together with a spatial general equilibrium model, very detailed, and for us what's important is regionalization. It takes into account the 39 municipalities within the São Paulo metropolitan area, the rest of the state of São Paulo, and the rest of the country, and we're able to map both labor payments from place of work to place of residence, and also to detect the different patterns of household consumption by place of residence. What kind of results do we get? Basically, we use the micro data, the firm data, and the flood data to assess the direct damage, and using firms' characteristics and the location. We have to make some assumptions, but at the end of the day, we get direct damage loss by sector, that we use this information to give shocks in the spatial CG model, changing their production functions, and we got results in which we're able to, from an initial direct damage, assess the total damage, and depending on, we're still working on these different resiliency scenarios for firms within São Paulo, we may get differential spatial results. The loss in space, so we get not only the loss in São Paulo city, but the rest of the São Paulo metropolitan area, the rest of the state, the rest of the country. So this is the kind of result we get. Actually, an issue that's very localized. As you see, it spreads over the whole municipality there. Just to conclude, I have raised a few key messages for us to have in mind when discussing future developments of Moroccan cities, and basically these are the four points that I wanted to raise. When looking at of the impact assessment at urban areas, of course, we need more and more to consider both internal and external interactions of the urban system. Mayor of Haddad mentioned this morning that complementarity, one of the future develops he foresees is the enhancing complementarity between Casablanca and Rabat, and looking at this linkage will be more and more important to understand what's happening in each urban area. Another thing that I think we can draw from this exercise is that actions by neighbors, for instance the waste disposal for neighboring municipalities, reinforces the consequences of this sibling local phenomenon that floods within the São Paulo city limits, and of course when we take into account all the whole production and income linkage, we see that economic effects are not only local, even though the direct effect starts in a very localized point. Finally, in the case of Brazil, to deal with the issue, we are having somehow a coordination problem, as the policy decisions are made at either the municipality level, we have municipality government, or at the state or national level, and there is no metropolitan authority with decision power in Brazil, and somehow to coordinate these policies that are heavily dependent on the spatial interdependence among the agents is somehow a problem that we face. So I think that's it.